Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. The Gray Man 2022 Movie Review. The Gray Man is a 2022 American action thriller film directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, from a screenplay Joe Russo co-wrote with Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, based on the 2009 novel of the same name by Mark Greaney. The film stars Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jessica Henwick, Regine Page, Wagner Moura, Julia Butters, Dhanush, in his Hollywood debut, Alfre Woodard and Billy Bob Thornton. Produced by the Russo brothers' company AGBO, it is the first film in a franchise based upon Greaney's Gray Man novels. The plot centers on CIA agent Sierra 6, portrayed by Gosling, who is on the run from sociopathic ex-CIA agent and mercenary Lloyd Hansen, Evans, upon discovering corrupt secrets about his superior. An adaptation of Greaney's novel was originally announced in 2011, with James Gray set to direct Brad Pitt, and later Charlize Theron in a gender-swapped role, though neither version ever came to fruition. The property lingered in development hell until July 2020, when it was announced the Russo brothers would direct, with both Gosling and Evans attached to star. Filming took place in Los Angeles, Paris, and Prague between March and July 2021. With a production budget of $200 million, it is among the most expensive films made by Netflix. The Gray Man began a limited theatrical release on July 15, 2022, followed by its digital release on Netflix on July 22, 2022. It received mixed reviews from critics, with praise for the ensemble cast and action sequences, but criticism toward the cliched script and breakneck pacing. The film is being followed by a sequel, with Gosling and Dhanush reprising their roles, as well as a spin-off. In 2003, senior CIA official Donald Fitzroy visits a prisoner named Cortland Gentry in Florida. 8 years earlier, Cortland was a minor convicted of killing his abusive father to protect his brother. Fitzroy offers him his freedom in exchange for working as an assassin in the CIA Sierra program, an elite black ops unit, which will allow him to exist in the gray. In 2021, Cortland, now known as Sierra 6, is working with fellow CIA agent Danny Miranda to assassinate a target named Dining Car, suspected of selling off national security secrets in Bangkok during the National Songkran Festival. Unable to do so stealthily without harming civilians, he attacks Dining Car directly, mortally wounding him. Before dying, he reveals he was also in the Sierra program as Sierra 4. He hands 6 an encrypted drive detailing the corruption of CIA official Denny Carmichael, the lead agent on the assassination mission. Carmichael is elusive about the true purpose of the mission and the contents of the drive when confronted by 6, and 6 refuses evacuation from Bangkok with Carmichael's men. Sending the drive to former Sierra program handler Margaret Cahill in Prague, he calls a now-retired Fitzroy to request extraction. Carmichael hires mercenary Lloyd Hansen, a former CIA agent kicked out for his sociopathic tendencies, to track down 6 and retrieve the drive. Hansen does so by kidnapping Fitzroy's niece Claire, forcing Fitzroy to authorize 6's murder by the extraction team. However, 6 kills them and escapes. Frustrated, Carmichael sends his subordinate Suzanne Brewer to oversee Hansen and keep him in line. Hansen keeps Claire hostage in a mansion in Croatia, at his base of operations. He also puts a massive bounty on 6's head to get mercenaries and assassins to hunt him down. 6 heads to Vienna to find the serial number of Claire's pacemaker from Laszlo Sosa, but he betrays him for the bounty. 6 escapes from Sosa's entrapment just as Hansen arrives with his team, and Hansen kills Sosa, while 6 kills all of Hansen's teammates and is rescued by Miranda from Hansen. Her reputation is shot thanks to the Bangkok mission, and she initially plans to bring him in to salvage her CIA career. 6 convinces her to drive him to Cahill's apartment in Prague, where she decrypts the drive. It reveals the extent of Carmichael's corruption on behalf of a mysterious benefactor working for a shadow government. Hansen sends several teams of assassins to Cahill, and a terminally ill Cahill blows up her home, so 6 and Miranda can escape. 6 is arrested and handcuffed in the square. A massive shootout in Prague results in all the police officers present slaughtered and 6 escapes on a tram. After a long chase and gun battle, 6 is once again saved by Miranda, in Cahill's bulletproof car. They infiltrate a hospital to track down Claire through her pacemaker's wireless signal. Subsequently, a Tamil mercenary, codenamed Lone Wolf, hired by Hansen, tracks and overcomes 6 and Miranda, retrieves the drive, and then brings it to Hansen for the offered bounty. 6 and Miranda follow the mercenary to Hansen's base. She creates a distraction while he infiltrates the mansion, rescuing Fitzroy and Claire. Mortally wounded as they flee, Fitzroy sacrifices himself, attempting to kill Hansen. Miranda manages to reclaim the drive after Lone Wolf, disgusted by Hansen's sociopathy and amoral tendencies, surrenders the drive to her before leaving. Hansen takes Claire hostage and drags her into a hedge maze. After a standoff, he lets go of Claire and fights with 6. Before 6 can kill him, Brewer shoots Hansen. She then tells 6 that she plans to pin Carmichael's actions on Hansen to gain leverage over him. Furthermore, Brewer pledges for Claire's safety, but only if 6 continues to work for the CIA. 6 and Miranda are forced to cooperate in the cover-up, where ultimately no action is taken against Carmichael. After the debriefing at the CIA headquarters, Miranda threatens to kill Carmichael if any harm comes to Claire. 6 escapes custody, and after a shootout in which the fates of Carmichael and Brewer are left unresolved, he rescues Claire and the two of them drive away to an unknown location. No further development was announced until July 2020, when the Russo brothers were announced to direct the film, from a screenplay by Joe Russo, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely, with additional material written by Anna Gregory, Charles Levitt, Rhett Reese, Joe Shrapnel, and Paul Wernick, for Netflix, to spawn a franchise. Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans were cast to star in the film. In December, Ana de Armas, Jessica Hennick, Wagner Moura, Julia Butters, and Dhanush were added to the cast. Reach Gene Page, Billy Bob Thornton, Alfre Woodard, E. McWhooker, and Scott Hayes joined the cast in March 2021. An April article about shooting in Prague had Michael Gandolfini included in the cast. In May 2021, Daobia Operetti joined the cast of the film. Filming was to commence on January 18, 2021, in Long Beach, California, but was pushed back to March 1. Page wrapped his role within the first month of shooting. It filmed in Europe in the spring, with locations including Prague, Czech Republic, the Château de Chantilly in France, and Croatia. Filming in Prague took place from June 27, 2021. Filming wrapped on July 31, 2021. The film's score was composed by Henry Jackman, who previously collaborated with the Russos on several of their films. Jackman began writing the score in December 2021, beginning with a 17-minute-long suite. The Gray Man began a limited theatrical release on July 15, 2022, followed by its release on Netflix on July 22, 2022. Though Netflix does not report theatrical grosses for its titles, distribution insiders estimated the film made around $200,000 from about 400 theaters in its opening weekend. IndieWire estimated the film made $300,000 to $375,000 over its first full week of theatrical release. Netflix reported the film was streamed for a total of 88.55 million hours over its first 3 days, which would equal around 43.55 million viewers. It was the most watched film in 84 countries. By September the film had totaled 253.8 million hours viewed. The template below, Rotten Tomatoes Pros, is being considered for deletion. See templates for discussion to help reach a consensus. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 45% of 276 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.5/10. The website's consensus reads, "The Gray Man has the star-studded outline of an entertaining action thriller, but it's filled in with lukewarm leftovers from far better films. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 49 out of 100, based on 55 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. And by commuting Cortland Gentry's sentence, what Fitzroy really meant was to remove him from prison, erase his identity, rename him Six, train him in Tel Aviv and then use Six as a government assassin until the day he dies. And if Six happens to die by his own government's hands, so be it. That's what happened to the other Sierra agents. In fact, Six's current mission is to kill Four, who went rogue after discovering corruption within the CIA. But in Four's dying moments, he gives Six a thumb drive with encrypted proof of his findings. Six is intrigued. How deep does the corruption go? Who is involved? Before he can find out, Denny Carmichael, the CIA agent who authorized Four's elimination, double-crosses Six. Worse still, he hires Lloyd Hansen to take him out. Everyone knows Lloyd is a sociopath. He was kicked out of the CIA after 5.5 months for bad ethics, zero impulse control and unsanctioned torture. Lloyd works in the private sector now. And since he isn't bogged down by the CIA's pesky rules, he can do whatever it takes to remove Six from the picture, including kidnapping Fitzroy and his niece, who are practically family to the identity-less Six, and threatening to murder them. Fitzroy became his niece's guardian when Claire's parents died suddenly, and they have a loving father-daughter relationship. Six, in turn, developed a family-like bond with the pair while protecting Claire when Fitzroy had to go on a mission in another country. Because of these relationships, Fitzroy initially refuses to give up Six's location to Lloyd. Once he realizes that Lloyd has preemptively kidnapped Claire for this eventuality, he orders Six's escorts to kill him. Six escapes but allows Fitzroy to explain the situation. He understands and forgives Fitzroy for the betrayal, working to save both him and Claire. And later, when he's given the chance to take out Lloyd once and for all, he prioritizes Claire's safety above vengeance, ensuring her rescue before pursuing Lloyd. There seems to be a code of honor amongst assassins, they typically don't kill kids. Meanwhile, Six finds allies both in and out of government service due to Carmichael's and Lloyd's lack of respect for this code. Throughout the film, people fight with their fists, feet, guns, knives, bazookas, grenades, and even fire extinguishers. We see a lot of bloodshed, and people die. And a lot of innocent bystanders, and police doing their jobs, get caught in the crossfire due to Lloyd and Carmichael's disregard for collateral damage. Several people are killed when they are thrown out of a plane, and the plane crashes when one of these people hits an engine, causing it to explode. One man who initially escapes with a parachute is quickly killed when Six intercepts him in the air and wraps the parachute cables around the man's throat. We later see the body hanging from the parachute on the ground. Others are killed by crashing vehicles, falling buildings, and explosions. Some characters are strangled. A few people sacrifice themselves for friends, one blows up her own oxygen tank, while another hides a live grenade on his person. It's said that Lloyd has a higher kill count than the entire Israeli Mossad. When we first meet him, Lloyd is torturing a man for information using battery jumper cables. Later, he pulls a man's fingernails out with a pair of pliers. He threatens nearly everyone, including his own employees. And he fires a flare gun next to Claire's face, burning her and promising that he's willing to kill a child. He also uses a shoelace to tourniquet two of his fingers that he lost in an explosion. We hear that someone was drowned after angering the wrong man in government. A man's head is held underwater in another scene. We hear that someone's eyes were gouged out over a snack food. A few people are hit in the face with fireworks and flare guns. Six gets pepper sprayed a few times. People are shot with tranquilizer darts. Combatants throw and smash things in anger, and one person shoots and kicks dead bodies in his frustration, calling them morons. Six learns that people in the government are covering up their involvement in unsanctioned assassinations, torture and bombings, and video footage shows that they unleashed significant collateral damage. We learn that Six's father was abusive. We see flashbacks to his father burning 6 with a car cigarette lighter and holding the boy's head underwater for talking back. 6 says he went to prison for killing his dad when the man went too far while beating 6's brother, even though his brother would have died if 6 hadn't stepped in. A woman who has smoked her whole life, and whom we see smoking in a flashback scene, is now on oxygen tanks, and her friend says she should have stopped smoking when she said she would. Although 6's service to his country in the CIA could be seen as a sort of redemption, he would have served a total of 36 years in prison if Fitzroy hadn't recruited him. His time is almost exclusively spent professionally murdering people, which isn't exactly a positive message. Claire is kidnapped. And because of her uncle's role in the CIA, this isn't the first time she's been a target. It appears she has a bit of trauma from the violence and kidnapping. People lie, blackmail, steal, and commit treason. 6 hires someone to make him a fake passport. A girl with a heart condition is rushed to the hospital a few times. A child is kidnapped and used as leverage in a negotiation. Carmichael and Lloyd are both incredibly condescending to Danny Miranda and Suzanne Brewer, female CIA agents. Carmichael threatens both of their jobs, blaming them for 6's escape. Things aren't always black and white when it comes to covert operations. You might need to take a life here or there in order to save hundreds of others. Kidnapping is frowned upon, but if it gets the target to turn himself in, then it might be seen as a necessary evil. In his mission to rescue Fitzroy and Claire, 6 kills dozens of people. The actual number is certainly higher, but someone in the movie mentions a body count of 30 mercenaries. And that line between what's right and what's wrong becomes less and less defined as the film progresses and more people seem to delve into the gray. True to the action thriller genre, The Gray Man is chock full of violence. There's nary a scene without some sort of physical altercation. And those scenes can get a bit gory at times. Language pops up throughout the film too, which includes a single use of the F-word and a few abuses of God's name. These elements could make the film seem a bit gray itself. It's certainly not the most explicit film Netflix has produced, although it is the most expensive. But it's hardly a wholesome family film either. I'd been looking forward to The Gray Man for a while, mostly due to the impressive cast that includes Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas and Billy Bob Thornton. I'm not familiar with the source material it's based on, so I'm just judging this as a film in its own right. The cast all seem to be enjoying themselves, with Ryan Gosling at his stoic best as 6 and Chris Evans chewing the scenery as the sociopathic Lloyd. There is a lot of rapid-fire dialogue which is at times funny but starts to grate after a short period of time. The shootout out on the streets of Prague is also one of the action highlights, but to be honest, aside from that, I mostly couldn't stand this film, and it's yet another clunker for Netflix. It apparently had a budget of $200 million, which is hard to believe as the visual effects weren't all that impressive, with distracting things like an overuse of smoke and debris during nearly all the action scenes, too much editing and distracting drone camera work which started off cool but once again it got old very quickly. I nearly turned the film off after the plane scene as it became incomprehensible and just looked fake, so I never believed any of it was happening. I had no emotional involvement in the story either, and I know this is based on a book, but everyone feels like a cartoon character and there are no surprises at all. Even Ana de Armas, who was the best thing about No Time to Die, was a little bland here, and after 2 very long hours we don't even get a proper ending, with it open for a sequel which I have no desire to ever watch. It's funny if you look back at a film like Commando, which is similar in how it has a one-man army protecting a little girl from bad guys, which is mostly what happens here, except that managed to tell a better story and have better action scenes for a fraction of the budget, and it's only 90 minutes. The Gray Man's pacing drags far too much and there is no reason for it to be as long as it is. The jarring flashback with 6 and the girl could have easily been chopped as it killed the pacing. Overall, The Gray Man is a big disappointment considering the talent involved, but aside from a few impressive action scenes and scenery-chewing moments from Chris Evans, it's far too long and has an over-reliance on flashy editing, taking us out of the majority of action scenes. It's maybe worth watching once, but like practically every other Netflix film, I have no intention of ever sitting through it again. It's not fair to judge a movie by its fans, despite the best protestations of the upcoming Barbie movie and its army of terminally online incel fans. When it comes to reactions to films though, I find myself often needing to detach and ignore whatever the greater conversation is, especially when the critics and general audiences have inverse reactions. This happens a lot, and it's happened again with the new Russo brothers film The Gray Man, which is currently sitting on Rotten Tomatoes at a critic score of 48% and an audience score of 90%. Cue the people who believe critics are irrelevant and real people know what's actually good. Before I go on, I should say I used to be a huge fan of the Russo brothers when they worked on Community, and I was extremely happy when they were picked up as the directors of Captain America, Winter Soldier, as well as 3 subsequent Marvel team-up films. And they did very well with those movies, becoming the highest-grossing directors in history. My taste for them has decreased though, mostly because I've aged as a cinephile and started to realize their limitations. The Russo brothers don't have a clear creative voice. That's been obvious to me since at least their first post-MCU film Cherry, a bland flavorless crime epic filled with tons of big social commentary moments and tons of expensive camera setups and huge actors, but was itself a film that said nothing, felt like nothing, and accomplished nothing. The Gray Man is a film very much in that realm. It represents a major attempt and career pivot for the directors of the highest-grossing film of all time to branch out in a new direction. It's the most expensive film in the history of Netflix with a budget of over $200 million, eclipsing recent films like Red Notice, Six Underground, and The Irishman for that title. It's also proving somewhat popular, as its high audience score can attest. And I don't blame audiences for that reaction, at all. The Gray Man is a very well-produced, filmed, acted, and scripted film. It's slick, there are tons of shots that look super expensive, the dialogue is quirky, Ryan Gosling is here as a cool guy and Chris Evans is hamming it up as a casually evil supervillain. There is a lot to recommend here. The story follows the eponymous Gray Men, a secret CIA group comprised of hitmen assembled from former jailed criminals who volunteered to serve out their lives as Sierra agents. When one agent, Sierra 6, discovers he was ordered to kill a fellow agent named Sierra 4, he finds himself hunted by his own organization who has sent a brutal private contractor named Lloyd Hansen to kill him by any means necessary to cover up dark secrets. The problem for me is just that the slickness covers up a lot of the middling nature of the film's story. At times, I was prepared to chop the film up as a kind of Mission Impossible / John Wick / The Bourne Identity ripoff, a gritty spy movie with an emphasis on gunfighting, colorful lighting, and tight hand-to-hand combat. Anyone who has seen those films though can attest that The Gray Man isn't nearly as tightly wound as those 3 movies. For all of its slickness, there's no panache in how the film is assembled. It's presented plainly, often somewhat disinterestedly. Readers may recall I gave Avengers, Endgame and Infinity War scores of 7.3/10 because I found them thematically confused and convoluted. My reaction to The Gray Man is very much the same, although those films felt more coherent and emotionally driven than their newest effort. This new film feels sloppy. All of the ideas in the film are fine, if pulled from a pedestrian off-the-shelf dime-a-dozen espionage novel and recycled from previous spy films. The film though lacks a deep sense of drive and urgency. It's a long film and it's mostly entertaining to watch at the moment but lacks a lot of its energy and grows tedious at times. What is the point of a film about questioning allegiances and fighting against the grain to do what's right when the movie itself barely cares about those concepts or explains why our character ought to care about them? The Gray Man is functionally harmless of course, and there is nothing overtly egregious about it, which likely explains the high Rotten Tomatoes score. Everything in the film superficially works. I almost find that more frustrating though because it doesn't leave enough of a mark. It lacks the constant propulsion of Mad Max, Fury Road or The Raid. It lacks the grandiose beauty of Casino Royale or Skyfall. It lacks the breakneck clarity of John Wick. It lacks the tightly wound dramatic tension of the recent Mission Impossible films. It just comes off as cold to me, like the cinematic equivalent of a Ritz cracker. It doesn't need to reinvent the wheel, it just needs flavor or purpose. It's clear from a distance the Russo brothers are hoping to turn Sierra 6 into their own James Bond, a reliable spy franchise they can return to in absence of a major franchise like the Avengers. Between this and Cherry, it's clear to me that they want to strike out on their own and show they have more to offer than just MCU films, which is clear given they apparently turned down the directing chairs for the upcoming Avengers, Kang Dynasty and Avengers, Secret Wars films coming out in 2025. And they've certainly succeeded at showing they can make a slick, pleasing movie that people will generally enjoy. As I'm watching their career trajectory though, I can't help but lament they don't have more vision for their work. They're quite content and generally competent in adapting other people's books and properties in as large and expensive a way as possible, but I can't see what it is that makes them tick other than vague allusions to better films and a liking for smooth jazz soundtracks. First, a quick summary. A CIA agent going by the code name 6, Ryan Gosling, is having a grand old time killing bad guys and being a secret agent man. However, things change when one of his targets reveals that his employers may not be all they say they are. Soon, we're on a fast-paced race for the truth. Caught in the crossfire is 6's original recruiter Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton. Meanwhile, rival agent Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, is determined to stop 6. And that's about as coherent as the story ever gets. For though there are plenty of twists and turns, I'll be damned if I could make heads or tails of any of it. The primary issue with The Gray Man, I think, is that it has absolutely zero patience with itself, its story, or the audience. The first scene in this movie features 6, imprisoned for murder, talking with Thornton's character, who offers him a way out by working for the CIA. We obviously don't know who either of the characters are at this point, and the scene doesn't do much to fill us in, or at least, not in any interesting way. Thornton gives an exposition dump so we understand the necessary details of Gosling's situation, but as far as what makes the character interesting or relatable, squat. We then go to Bangkok for Gosling's latest mission. As I mentioned in the summary, 6 finds out from his target that his employers can't be trusted, which sets him on a path of discovery. However, the plot progression is too fast for that revelation to have any meaning. In the scene just before, we learn that 6 will have to start working for this org, right? And then in this next sequence, we find out that he can't trust them and is now working against them. Okay, so for the character this may be an interesting betrayal, but to an audience just getting introduced to these players, it's an info dump. There's no intrigue here because the film is not taking its time. The audience should see 6 and his employers on friendly terms before turning the relationship on its head, otherwise it doesn't feel like it matters. It doesn't help that the movie makes some very unoriginal choices with its plot. Of course this bad guy has a villain scar on his face. Of course 6 refuses to kill him at first because a kid gets in the way. I can practically see the writers ticking boxes. So the pacing of the story is too quick. Unfortunately, the editing decided to be even faster, because the amount of cuts is dizzying. The action scenes in The Gray Man are horribly disorienting, which means they're not fun but rather obnoxious and even abrasive. Say what you will of the Uncharted movie, at least I could make sense of its airplane action scene. In a similar scene in The Gray Man, I strained to maintain focus. It is so quick, so cut up, so computerized, so frantically dull. The editing also hurts the dialogue. For instance, there's one scene where 6's boss talks with his assistant in a bathroom. Not only is the dialogue delivered in this very plain shot reverse shot editing, but it happens so fast, with every shot following the rhythm of each new line and cutting back and forth so quickly that it might give you whiplash. Would it kill the camera to hold on a wide shot for a second? Shoot the environments in an interesting, provocative way where all characters are in frame. Not only is the rhythm of the editing too fast within the scenes themselves, but the way each of them are connected to the other lacks cohesion. An example, we're with Ryan Gosling in Bangkok and he makes a call as he's walking on the street. Then we transition to Baku, where Thornton answers. The film has a weird habit of filling the entire screen with the name of wherever it decides to warp you next, which is what happens here. But after Thornton picks up the phone, we cut back in Bangkok and following 6 as they talk. Why does it matter to us that Bob Thornton is in Baku for this one scene if it's just a phone call? He isn't even outside. First, a quick summary. A CIA agent going by the code name 6, Ryan Gosling, is having a grand old time killing bad guys and being a secret agent man. However, things change when one of his targets reveals that his employers may not be all they say they are. Soon, we're on a fast-paced race for the truth. Caught in the crossfire is 6's original recruiter Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton. Meanwhile, rival agent Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, is determined to stop 6. And that's about as coherent as the story ever gets. For though there are plenty of twists and turns, I'll be damned if I could make heads or tails of any of it. The primary issue with The Gray Man, I think, is that it has absolutely zero patience with itself, its story, or the audience. The first scene in this movie features 6, imprisoned for murder, talking with Thornton's character, who offers him a way out by working for the CIA. We obviously don't know who either of the characters are at this point, and the scene doesn't do much to fill us in, or at least, not in any interesting way. Thornton gives an exposition dump so we understand the necessary details of Gosling's situation, but as far as what makes the character interesting or relatable, squat. We then go to Bangkok for Gosling's latest mission. As I mentioned in the summary, 6 finds out from his target that his employers can't be trusted, which sets him on a path of discovery. However, the plot progression is too fast for that revelation to have any meaning. In the scene just before, we learn that 6 will have to start working for this org, right? And then in this next sequence, we find out that he can't trust them and is now working against them. Okay, so for the character this may be an interesting betrayal, but to an audience just getting introduced to these players, it's an info dump. There's no intrigue here because the film is not taking its time. The audience should see 6 and his employers on friendly terms before turning the relationship on its head, otherwise it doesn't feel like it matters. It doesn't help that the movie makes some very unoriginal choices with its plot. Of course this bad guy has a villain scar on his face. Of course 6 refuses to kill him at first because a kid gets in the way. I can practically see the writers ticking boxes. So the pacing of the story is too quick. Unfortunately, the editing decided to be even faster, because the amount of cuts is dizzying. The action scenes in The Gray Man are horribly disorienting, which means they're not fun but rather obnoxious and even abrasive. Say what you will of the Uncharted movie, at least I could make sense of its airplane action scene. In a similar scene in The Gray Man, I strained to maintain focus. It is so quick, so cut up, so computerized, so frantically dull. The editing also hurts the dialogue. For instance, there's one scene where 6's boss talks with his assistant in a bathroom. Not only is the dialogue delivered in this very plain shot reverse shot editing, but it happens so fast, with every shot following the rhythm of each new line and cutting back and forth so quickly that it might give you whiplash. Would it kill the camera to hold on a wide shot for a second? Shoot the environments in an interesting, provocative way where all characters are in frame. Not only is the rhythm of the editing too fast within the scenes themselves, but the way each of them are connected to the other lacks cohesion. An example, we're with Ryan Gosling in Bangkok and he makes a call as he's walking on the street. Then we transition to Baku, where Thornton answers. The film has a weird habit of filling the entire screen with the name of wherever it decides to warp you next, which is what happens here. But after Thornton picks up the phone, we cut back in Bangkok and following 6 as they talk. Why does it matter to us that Bob Thornton is in Baku for this one scene if it's just a phone call? He isn't even outside. There's a moment in The Gray Man, the new movie from Avengers, Endgame directors Anthony and Joe Russo, in which hell is breaking loose outside a building in Prague. It's hard to keep track of all the globe-trotting in this movie. The building is blowing up, there are heavily armed assassins and local security forces shooting each other to pieces in the square outside, and soon a city tram is hurtling off its tracks and crashing through more vehicles while demolishing a whole city block. All I could think was, wouldn't this rise to the level of an international incident? Yet for the film's main character, played stoically by Ryan Gosling, and the person helping him, played with as much verve as can be mustered by Ana de Armas, it's just an excuse to dust themselves off and head to the next set piece. That's how generic and hermetically sealed a movie The Gray Man is. With a reported cost of $200 million, it's the most expensive film produced by Netflix to date, and the film loosely based on the first of a series of novels by author Mark Greaney certainly looks like all the money is up there on the screen. This is a big, slick, professionally produced spectacle that rapidly flies by and has enough on-screen movement to keep pulling your eyes to the screen in that Netflix in the background kind of way. But the plot machinations and character development courtesy of Joe Russo and screenwriting duo Chris Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who did far better work on all four of the Russos' Marvel movies, are about as stock as they come, and the movie can't shake the overall familiarity of its plot. Eventually you realize, this is all style over substance, with little to say about its subject or characters. Gosling is the Gray Man of the title, a fellow named Court Gentry who was sprung from prison where he was serving time for murdering his dad until CIA handler Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, got him out and gave a job as a clandestine assassin due to his specialized skill set. 18 years later, and now going under the code name Sierra 6, Gentry sets out on a routine assignment but flubs it due to a child being near the target. He then learns that his target was once Sierra 4, also an assassin for the CIA. Agency bigwig Denny Carmichael, Reach Gene Page of Bridgerton fame, wants him dead because he knows too much about Carmichael's evil, secret agenda. Now that Gentry has this knowledge, and the MacGuffin that contains it, he becomes Carmichael's next target. The latter taps psychopathic mercenary for hire Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, to do whatever it takes and kill whoever he must to put Gentry down. Going on the run with only the liaison for his last mission, de Armas, helping him, Gentry must expose Carmichael, outwit Hansen, and rescue the only people he cares about before it's too late. Rogue agents, double-crossing bosses, a gleefully lunatic killer recruited only for those very special missions, it's all here, along with a steady stream of shootouts, explosions, brutal fistfights, and continuous chases designed to make you forget that the characters are thinner than wet tissue paper and that the twists and turns of the plot add up to very little in the end. While Gosling's character is given a token motivation late in the movie to explain some of his actions, and the actor is physically impressive in the role, he also plays Gentry so cool that he's almost comatose at times. Gosling is watchable enough to make it work, and you're mildly rooting for him to win, but he feels like a blank slate a lot of the time, and the one-liners, this script is full of them, just sort of fall out of his mouth and hang in the air. Thornton adds his natural eccentricity to his role and gets to do a little more with his character, but almost everyone else suffers by comparison. De Armas and Jessica Hennick portray tough, no-nonsense agents, but they literally have no lives other than their roles as enablers/helpers to Gosling and Page, respectively. Page is the typically irredeemable evil CIA suit, slick and soulless and one-dimensional to a fault. Acclaimed Indian actor Dhanush shows up as a freelance mercenary hired by Hansen, but despite his charisma and action chops his role is mostly superfluous. Evans is the only real wild card. In what is clearly his biggest attempt yet to play an anti-Captain America, Evans cackles and smirks maniacally at every turn. You can practically see him forcing himself to not twirl his porn star mustache, which should get its own star billing. He's pretty much acting in his own movie, fast with the jokes even as he's yanking someone's fingernails out during one torture scene. But his Hansen is ultimately cartoonish, undercutting any real dread he might generate. That's really the final analysis on The Gray Man. there's little generation of dread, tension, suspense, emotion, humor, or even engagement. The movie's beats are so familiar, the characters so cookie-cutter, the action sequences and fights so by the numbers, if occasionally fun, that the movie undercuts itself. Even the around-the-world settings don't make much of an impact because the movie flies in and out of them so fast. Seriously, this is one of those movies where everyone can get anywhere in the world in 5 minutes. The Russos clearly know how to put a huge film together and just as clearly hope to start a new franchise with The Gray Man, unless Marvel comes calling with Secret Wars, of course. But aside from its scope, a few striking action moments, and the overall quality of the cast, this is like a battle world of spy thrillers, with pieces of it cut and pasted from other properties. Other than Extraction, I can't think of another English-language action movie from Netflix that I actually enjoyed, let alone that I felt deserved a sequel. Writer/director Joe Russo, half of a directing duo with his brother Anthony, wrote that movie, which is why I was partially optimistic when I saw he was co-writing the focus of this review, The Gray Man. Then I saw that Ryan Gosling was going to star alongside Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, and that its budget would be one of Netflix's largest at $200 million. Again, I felt optimistic, but then I remembered that this is Netflix we're talking about, and my feelings quickly became a lot more guarded. Now, finally, I've watched it and had time to think. After some contemplation, I've come to the conclusion that it's okay, but definitely not worth the $200 million dumped into it. The Gray Man opens with our hero, codenamed Sierra 6, Ryan Gosling, on mission in Thailand with fellow CIA operative Danny Miranda, Ana de Armas. Their mission is to eliminate a man who's carrying the asset, which we soon find out is a memory card that contains some compromising intel about some CIA shot callers. After getting his hands on the asset, Six chooses not to turn it in, forcing CIA Chief Denny Carmichael, Regine Page, to let loose his psychotic henchman, Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans. Hoping to draw Six out, Lloyd chooses to target his mentor, Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, and his niece, Julia Butters, with whom Six has grown close. With Donnie's help, Six fights off hordes of Lloyd's contractors in an attempt to rescue the two people closest to him, leading to a violent final confrontation. Without a doubt, The Gray Man starts off strong, with a colorful and riveting sequence in a Thai club that ends with a brutal hand-to-hand fight amongst detonating fireworks tubes. In this action scene, and all others, Gosling acquits himself well, demonstrating his character's singular ability to swiftly dispatch his opponents. This sequence also effectively establishes Six's moral code, as he clearly expresses his desire to limit civilian casualties and collateral damage. In addition, de Armas gets to demonstrate her fighting abilities once again, having previously impressed in No Time to Die. Her character, Danny, is immediately shown to be a total badass and a worthy female counterpart to Six. All in all, the first 20 minutes or so of this movie are excellent. Sadly, the longer The Gray Man goes on, the easier it becomes to identify its flaws and deficiencies. Take the villains, for example. Within a few scenes, it's obvious that Denny Carmichael is nothing but a one-note, antagonistic administrator, wasting Regine Page on a role that's devoid of nuance and physicality. It's pretty much the same for Denny's number 2, Suzanne Brewer, Jessica Hennick, but at least she gets to be in the field and annoyingly yell at a well-known psycho, for being a psycho. I'm of course talking about Lloyd, who's undeniably an amusing bad guy, but his only prominent trait is that he likes hurting people and joking around while doing so. Chris Evans is a fine actor, and I liked him in this one, but he was almost overcast here. His character has no depth, he's evil for the sake of being evil. Considering that superhero villains are similarly thinly written, you'd think the guy who just shed Captain America would want to play someone more substantial. Thankfully, the good guys are a bit better drawn, but only a bit. Thornton is sound as retired CIA officer Donald Fitzroy, exhibiting the necessary traits to make him believable as someone Six views as a father. It's similar for de Armas, who imbues Danny with characteristics that make her plausible as someone Six would trust as an ally. They're solid characters reinforced with competent performances, but they're also fairly one-dimensional. Then there's Six, who stands head and shoulders above everyone else. I struggled to find fault with how he was characterized. His backstory was simple but plausible, and I found it more affecting than I thought I would. His relationship with Fitzroy's niece, Claire, was also pleasant, if not underwritten. And it didn't hurt that Gosling brought his innate screen presence to the party. Other than him, I've only seen a handful of actors who can add more charisma and integrity to a film by simply being in it. Another thing I noticed as The Gray Man continued is that its action is mind-numbing. I know, as an action buff, I shouldn't complain when a movie is too action-packed, but I kind of have to here. Early on, there's a set piece on a plane that's quite difficult to follow, featuring some of the worst CGI/VFX that I've ever seen in a film with a 9-figure budget. Later on, when Six and Danny get to Europe, the movie devolves into shootout after car chase after shootout. Don't get me wrong, some of these scenes are really good. The massive set piece in the second act got my blood pumping, with belt-fed machine guns and RPGs tearing Prague apart. Still, one of these sequences should have been cut in favor of character building and or story development. I mean, when two different characters blow themselves up in almost the exact same way, you're clearly running out of ideas. Trim it down. At this point, I only have a few more critiques. First, The Gray Man tries too hard to be funny when it shouldn't, which isn't surprising given the Russo brothers' history doing Marvel movies. It irritated me that some characters quipped when something dead serious just happened. Second, Dhanush deserved better. His lone wolf character is awesome, and his fight scenes are decent, but the last scene he's in is perplexing. Third, what's with all the drone shots? I get it, they're cool, but not so much if it becomes distracting. Lastly, the ending is incredibly bland. I understand that the filmmakers have sequels to set up, but come on, a better conclusion has to exist. Okay, I feel I should clarify, I don't hate The Gray Man. Sure, I have numerous criticisms about its writing, special effects, and overall composition. I mean, I've seen movies made for a lot less that look a lot better and seem a lot more thoughtful, especially from an action standpoint. So no, it's not a great action movie, hell, it's not necessarily a good one. But it is entertaining, and I did find myself rooting for Six and Danny. Gosling and Armas are top-notch, as usual, and there's definitely a future for their characters. That said, I wouldn't expect them to ever surpass, or even come close to, Bond or Bourne. And to the Russos, if you're reading this, rein in the VFX and keep it in camera, even if that means more drone shots. I'd make that exchange gladly. Ryan Gosling may not have played a superhero yet, but he gets closer than ever before in the mega-budget Netflix production The Gray Man, the streaming service's summer blockbuster from the directors of Avengers, Endgame, Anthony and Joe Russo. It's understandable why Gosling would sign up and Netflix would open not just their wallet but an entire bank vault for the Russos to adapt the book by Mark Greaney, with an eye to starting a new mega franchise of their own. However, it's becoming clearer and clearer that Netflix has too little creative oversight over projects like these, just letting creators run off with their money and not really caring about what they deliver. After all, it fits the algorithm, right? People will watch The Gray Man by the millions. They just won't be able to name a memorable thing about it a few days later. If this is the start of a franchise, and it almost certainly is, let's hope The Gray Man finds a little more definition in future installments. The star of La La Land and Drive plays a spy named Sierra 6007 was taken, who was recruited out of prison by a handler named Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton. After that very brief setup, The Gray Man hits the ground running with a mission gone very awry when Six is tasked by a new boss named Denny Carmichael, Regine Page, with taking out a target that turns out to be a fellow secret agent. The dying man tells Six that Denny is a bad guy before handing him the intel to prove it. Immediately, our stoic hero is on the run, before he's really had any time to develop a personality as a movie character. That kind of blank protagonist is fine for taut, precise action films like those in the John Wick franchise, but this isn't nearly that tight of a production. This movie needed an Ethan Hunt, someone defined by more than just the cliches that he won't shoot a kid and he has a dark past. Seriously, it would be tough to name 5 characteristics of this hero that we're supposed to follow for 2 hours. Never a good sign. As Six goes on the run, Carmichael calls in Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, a former CIA Black Ops mercenary who now works in the private sector where there are even fewer rules about things like torture and dumb mustaches. Hansen will do whatever it takes to get Six, including kidnapping Fitzroy's daughter Claire, Julia Butters, to get his attention. Of course, Six has a connection with Claire, having watched over her a few years ago. He's the spy who wants kids to live, which separates him from a sociopath like Hansen. Meanwhile, another spy named Danny Miranda, Ana de Armas, joins Six on his quest for freedom. And she is given even less character definition than her male counterparts, believe it or not. And that's really it for 2 hours. Good guy, bad guy, woman in the middle, kid in jeopardy, things go boom. Some of the action sequences, especially an insane one in a town square, can be pretty effective, but most of the film is shot at such a bizarrely low light that it dulls even the incredible screen presence of the undeniably charismatic Gosling, Evans, and Armas. Seriously, whoever thought the right lighting for most of a globe-trotting action flick was the low-light palette of Ozark deserves a cinematic jail sentence. The Gray Man should be joyously over the top if it wants to be a new Fast and Furious or Bourne franchise, but with the exception of a wisecracking Evans, everything here feels so programmatically dull. It's a silly piece of popcorn entertainment that too often forgets that this kind of venture needs to be fun. Part of the problem is that Evans is never set up as an interesting threat. In fact, he seems kind of horrible at his job. A colleague says that an asset removal gone horribly, a headline making wrong, will be taught in schools as to what not to do. This isn't a battle of wills so much as a good spy versus a crazy spy. There's something underdeveloped in the idea that Gosling is the old-fashioned spy and Evans is the brute force modern maniac whose strategy seems to just be to blow up as much as possible, but the script by Joe Russo, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely keeps trying to sell us on Hansen being a terrifying genius, and there's really no evidence of the latter part. Like so much original entertainment in the streaming world, The Gray Man seems scared to take an actual risk. There have been many pieces written about the algorithms and templates that feel like they're driving creative decisions more than actual human beings. When will a company like Netflix throw $200 million at a movie and emerge with a John Wick, Mission Impossible, Mad Max, Fury Road, or even a Fast 5? It might take an actual superhero for something like that to happen. I always find it fascinating that Netflix will put down $200 million for a movie, then basically keep it only for Netflix subscribers. I guess they have money to burn, as I don't think anyone is specifically subscribing to see just one film, and if they did they would probably take advantage of a free trial period. Anyway, The Gray Man is the newest addition to the Netflix lineup, and stars Ryan Gosling as Sierra Six, a CIA Black Ops assassin who is forced to go on the run after uncovering incriminating secrets about the agency, and Chris Evans as Lloyd Hansen, a psychopathic former CIA agent who is contracted by CIA bosses to capture Six. The film starts in 2003 with senior CIA official Donald Fitzroy, played by Billy Bob Thornton, visiting a convicted murderer in prison. The murderer killed his abusive father in 1995, to protect his brother. Fitzroy offers the murderer freedom, but there is a catch: he will have to work as an assassin for the CIA Sierra program. These assassins work off the books, and take out enemies of the state with no questions asked. The murderer, Ryan Gosling, agrees and takes the codename Sierra Six. Basically, known now as Six throughout the film. Fast forward to 2021 and Six finds himself on a mission in Bangkok. He is told he has to assassinate someone who has been selling national security secrets to enemies of the country. Six is working alongside Danny Miranda, Ana de Armas. As he is about to assassinate the target, a child walks into view, so he holds back, despite his bosses ordering him to take out the target and that the child is acceptable collateral damage. He fakes a gun jam, and moves in to take out the suspect in close quarters instead, after pulling a fire alarm. He takes down the suspect, but before he dies he reveals he worked for the same people who hired Six, and that he was known as Sierra 4. He then hands him an encrypted USB drive hidden in a necklace, and tells him it has details of the corruption of CIA official Denny Carmichael. Reach Gene Page. Carmichael is also the lead agent on this mission and Six's boss. When Carmichael is elusive about why this man was to be assassinated, Six refuses evacuation and escapes. The CIA realize that Six is a problem and now need to take him out. Carmichael hires mercenary Lloyd Hansen, a former CIA agent who was kicked out of the agency for his psychopathic tendencies. It is up to him to track down Six, and retrieve the USB drive. What follows is a non-stop 2-hour action film, that really does have everything: double crosses, hand-to-hand fights, car chases, shootouts, young kid being kidnapped. You think of the action film cliché scene and this film has it. Ryan Gosling is strong in the lead, and pulls off the calm sort of good guy killer role very well. Chris Evans is excellent as psychotic Lloyd Hansen. You know he is psychotic because he wears a mustache, and the rest of the cast is just full of big-name stars. Wednesday night was the premiere of The Gray Man, the Russo brothers' ambitious action thriller that, with a budget of $200 million, is the most expensive movie Netflix has ever made. On Thursday, the review embargo for the film lifted, bringing with it a generally underwhelmed response from critics. The film stars Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans as court Gentry and Lloyd Hansen. Gentry is on the run from Hansen after coming into possession of top-secret CIA information, and Hansen is unforgiving in his efforts to chase Gentry down. Ana de Armas also stars as Danny Miranda, alongside Reach Gene Page, Jessica Hennick, Julia Butters, Dhanush, Alfred Woodard, and Billy Bob Thornton. Overall, most critics agree that The Gray Man is an over-the-top attempt by Netflix to capture the magic of blockbuster thrillers like the 007 movies. Gosling, Evans, de Armas, and their co-stars show their talents, but the majority of reviews criticize its cliched script and breakneck pacing. Despite some issues, a few critics conceded that even with its flaws, the film is still a fun watch, and the strong ensemble makes it worth a viewer's time to see what this big-budget blockbuster is really about. There's nothing terribly original about the storytelling. Take a little of Shooter, a lot of John Wick, add a dash of Jason Bourne, shaken, but not stirred, into the License to Kill formula, and you've got the basic idea. What makes The Gray Man exciting? And let's not beat around the bush, this is the most exciting original action property Netflix has delivered since. Bright are the shades the ensemble bring to their characters and the little ways in which the Russos come through where those other films fell short. So begins a blockbuster so big that you can actually feel the price of your Netflix subscription going up with each new scene, this listless simulacrum of a summer action movie bouncing from one lavish Asian or European location to the next as it searches in vain for the streamer's first bona fide popcorn franchise. The algorithmic results don't reflect well on the Russo brothers' directing chops. Their monumental spandex operas seldom required and never displayed the kind of muscular imagination needed to stage Michael Bay-like fight sequences, but The Gray Man is even more damning for Netflix itself, particularly so far as it epitomizes the streamer's penchant for producing mega-budget movies that feel like glorified deepfakes of classic multiplex fare. For the most part, Netflix's The Gray Man is a damn delight. It's a throwback to the days when studios could safely rely on throwing a couple of A-listers at an action script and some big explosions, give it a competent director, and have a hit on their hands. Frequently more fun and escapist than some of the recent James Bond films, it's also based on a book character, though not highly advertised as such. Ryan Gosling plays Mark Greeny's freelance assassin and former CIA operative Court Gentry, a name the movie largely eschews in favor of his code designation, Sierra 6. For Gosling fans whose favorite movie was Drive, this feels like a slightly pumped up, dumbed down version of that character, with significantly more to say about how he doesn't actually have more to say. But Evans, smirking like a catbird, is the movie's main antagonist, and his pairing with Gosling is the pretty man Godzilla vs. Kong most viewers came to see. Though he's played Captain America for Anthony and Joe Russo many times over, most recently in Avengers: Endgame, the actor seems positively giddy every time he gets to flip to the role of, as some have fondly come to call him, America's a-hole. Hear everything about Lloyd, from his fascist little mustache to his schoolyard taunts, delights him. Against Six's "Right cool guy" remove, he's the leering frat boy jester, pretty much begging to be punched in that perfectly symmetrical face. The majority of the cast is similarly shackled by the edit's need to zip from scene to scene without a lasting human moment. De Armas isn't so much doe-eyed as she is a deer in the headlights. She's a more than capable actress, but she struggles here to so much as spin a questioning glance from the story's abyss. Even poor Jessica Hennick, who plays Carmichael's second-in-command, is saddled only with occasional objections and observations about Hansen's destructive methods. In order to give the film the appearance of conscience or dilemma, the CIA needs to assassinate people the right way, quietly and legally. How brave, until the Gray Man recalls that Hennick may be useful in some potential sequel, granting her a last-second usefulness that only serves to rob tension from existing scenes. Gosling says and does little of entertainment value, which is more about the screenplay that positions him as a generic action figure. Ditto Ana de Armas as Gosling's reluctant tag-along gal. Evans chews up the scenery, but most of his one-liners and zingers come off as preordained memes and GIF moments that exist in a vacuum. All three of them do little more than remind us of better movies where they played similar characters. Billy Bob Thornton and Alfre Woodard, playing two elder agents trying to survive with dignity as the world passes them by, do their best to elevate their material. Rising star Julia Butters holds her own even though she is quickly made a full-time hostage/damsel. Perhaps by default, the attempt by this film to recapture the glory days of the Hollywood action movie can't help but revert to past-their-time tropes and cliches. In their post-Marvel work, the Russos have notably given their superhero stars room to stretch. Last year's ambitious cherry allowed Tom Holland to flex some dramatic muscles beyond getting in a Spider-Man suit, and the Gray Man lets Evans deliciously explore his wicked side. Yes, he is the best of the Chris's, and him doing a complete 180 from virtuous Captain America proves that once again. Lloyd yells at underlings, goes punch for punch and snark for snark with Gosling, and absolutely owns a plethora of clever zingers like, if you want to make an omelet, you gotta kill some people. If you're craving an overblown action movie, The Gray Man is probably worth a stream for him alone, a devilish villain playing an otherwise forgettable spy game. Among the biggest, and most expensive, Netflix movies of 2022 is The Gray Man. The big-budgeted star-studded action whopper from the Russo brothers sports a hefty $200 million budget. With Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, and Ana de Armas highlighting its star power, The Gray Man is a major investment for the streaming platform which has suffered its share of losses recently. Netflix needs this blockbuster to work, and for what it's going for, it actually does. Anthony and Joe Russo became pretty high-profile filmmakers thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To their credit, they were behind 4 of the MCU's very best films. Each were massive box office successes. Since moving away from superheroes, the brothers have taken aim at making films for streaming platforms. It's an interesting choice that they've been quick to defend. See Joe's recent bizarre slamming of those who hold the theater experience in high regard. The Russos' first post-MCU venture was the not-so-great Tom Holland film Cherry. Now they give it another whirl with The Gray Man, a movie co-written by their frequent MCU collaborators, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. The film is based on author Mark Greene's 2009 debut novel about a former CIA operative who suddenly finds himself targeted by his own government. The movie opens in 2003 at a Florida state prison where inmate Court Gentry, Gosling, is visited by federal agent Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton. After a few pleasantries, Fitzroy tells Court that he's there on behalf of the government to commute his sentence. Of course, there is one pretty significant condition. Court must join the covert CIA Sierra program where he'll be trained to kill bad guys. And since you've already killed one, it shouldn't be too difficult, Fitzroy reasons. As you can probably guess, Court agrees. Jump ahead 18 years. Court, aka Sierra 6, is a seasoned Sierra operative and working a mission in Bangkok with field agent Danny Miranda, de Armas. Things take a turn after he discovers their target is a fellow government assassin designated Sierra 4, Callan Mulvey. In his dying words, forewarns 6 that the shifty CIA chief Denny Carmichael, Reach Gene Page, is crooked and intent on erasing anyone who can prove it. He gives 6 a memory drive with incriminating evidence against Carmichael and a number of other high-ranking feds. Realizing he's probably next on his government's kill list, 6 skips his extraction and goes off the grid. He contacts his old handler Fitzroy, who was pushed into early retirement by Carmichael. Fitzroy reaches out to some old friends to help 6 escape. In the meantime, Carmichael grows more nervous and impatient. He calls on Lloyd Hansen, Evans, dressed as if he's been plucked out of a 1960s sitcom, a sociopathic contract killer known for his brutal and unhinged methods. As you can imagine, the injection of Lloyd into the equation leads to violence and chaos. He immediately goes after Fitzroy for leverage, even kidnapping his niece Claire, Julia Butters, the chatty scene stealer from Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, to help lure 6 out. Lloyd then puts out a huge bounty on 6's head and sends it out to hit teams and safe houses around the globe. Sounds like a foolproof approach. But 6 proves to be a lot harder to kill than the egotistical Lloyd expected. Despite Joe Russo's strange attempt at devaluing the theater experience, there's no denying that the Gray Man would have popped on the big screen. The globe-trotting to locations like Vienna, London, Hong Kong, Berlin, and Croatia among others is fun, and the energetic camera of DP Stephen F. Winden gives us plenty of cool shots to enjoy. But the action scenes are the film's bread and butter, and the Russos, Winden, the visuals effects team, and the sound designers give us some real bangers that scream for the largest screen possible. The best is an over-the-top yet insanely fun action sequence through the streets of Prague. It's a blast. Another plus is how the Gray Man handles its villains. Carmichael isn't another narcissist obsessed with world domination or a lunatic set on global destruction. Instead, he represents something more chilling, the secret lengths our own government protectors might go to hide their abuse of the public's trust. Murdering police officers, gunning down innocent civilians, dispatching a government-sanctioned psychopath, all acceptable in their efforts to cover their dirty tracks. Granted, the movie isn't out to make a particularly profound point about it. But it's a welcome change from the normal antagonists who populate these kinds of films. Performance-wise, the movie features some pretty good ones. Gosling ratchets down on the emotionless poker-faced persona he has developed over a handful of other grittier action movies, but lets a little humor slip through now and then. And he certainly has the physical chops. Ana de Armas is given a lot more to do here than in her recent James Bond adventure, and she makes the most of it. She slips into the background a little too much, but whenever she re-emerges it's usually with a bang. And I enjoyed seeing Thornton back on screen. He's a great presence, as is Alfre Woodard, who's terrific in the few moments she's given. On the villain side, Page is just the kind of detestable baddie the film needs. He's never over the top, and he has this kind of self-serving callousness that makes you hate his guts. Chris Evans gets the film's showiest role. Outside of Captain America, there's not a lot on Evans' resume to get excited about. That said, there is one character type he has always excelled at, the brash, smart-mouthed wisecracker. It was his signature in films like The Fantastic Four, The Losers, and even Knives Out. Here Evans hams it up in a variation of that role. But there's a key reason the performance works so well. Rather than let Lloyd turn into a clown, the Russos know when to dial back the silliness and let Evans take the character down some more sinister paths. Without that restraint, Lloyd could have become an annoyance. Instead, he's a formidable antagonist. The biggest knock on the film is that the story's entire framework is undeniably simple and familiar. Even with the slightly different flavor of villains, the Gray Man is too by the books. Rather than take some narrative big swings, the story is content with keeping it conventional. But for those hungry for fast-paced grand-scaled action, the Russos have you covered. The energy is high and the set pieces are massive. Add to it a charisma-rich cast and you have a popcorn movie that may not reinvent the wheel story-wise, but that delivers just the kind of fun adrenaline jolt action lovers crave. The Gray Man premieres tomorrow, July 22nd, on Netflix. There's a scene about midway through Joe and Anthony Russo's The Gray Man in which Chris Evans' psychopathic intelligence operator, Lloyd Hansen, tortures Billy Bob Thornton's retired handler, Fitzroy, by peeling his fingernails off with a plier. The moment recalls similar torture scenes in past films such as Sirena, but the key difference here is we only see the before and after, the pliers applied to the fingernail and the detached, bloody fingernail on a nearby table. It seems that the Russos, who have a taste for violent, intense action films, still cannot escape the four-quadrant approach of their Avengers films, and so will not show Evans, erstwhile Captain America, ripping fingernails off in agonizing detail. Thus, The Gray Man, which is their attempt at a down-and-dirty action film, ultimately pulls its punches. To be gracious, I see the appeal in the film's overall approach. It's a globe-spanning action film, with scenes in Bangkok, Prague, Vienna, and Croatia, among other exotic locales, which is especially appealing coming after 2 years of limited travel during the pandemic. It's obviously big budget, reportedly $200 million, which shows up not only in the variety of locations, but also in the big-name cast, which includes Chris Evans, Billy Bob Thornton, Ana de Armas, Jessica Henwick, Wagner Moura, Alfre Woodard, and, its leading man, Ryan Gosling. In particular, it's a pleasure to see Gosling on the big screen again, or should I say small screen, this being a Netflix film. The enigmatic leading man had taken a hiatus since starring in Damien Chazelle's excellent Neil Armstrong biopic, First Man, in 2018. The Gray Man is his first film in 4 years, and it's fun to watch Gosling Sierra 6, his code name, we never learn his real name, weasel his way around beautiful foreign cities, dispatch CIA contractors, and flirt with Ana de Armas's CIA agent, Danny Miranda, in the midst of gun battles. A line that is particularly amusing when delivered by Gosling: "No one throws a loaded gun." As his code name suggests, Gosling's character is the titular Gray Man, an off-the-book CIA asset who will kill whoever he's told to and never leave a paper trail. We learn a tidbit about his backstory and why he ended up in prison as a 15-year-old, but we don't get much more than Gosling being Gosling. Casting him as an emotional enigma counts as typecasting at this point, but I'm not complaining. The man wears mysterious charisma well. However, the film does struggle to impress when it's not following Gosling engaged in close-quarters combat. The Russos are action junkies and aspiring action movie auteurs. They are capable of crafting entertaining action scenes, albeit not overly impressive ones. They brought some action panache to television episodes of Community, and injected some rough and tumble fisticuffs into the MCU in Captain America, The Winter Soldier. They also produced 2020's Chris Hemsworth Netflix action film, Extraction, which had some good action in the midst of its gritty theatrics. Side note, are the Russos adamant on making a Netflix action film starring each actor from the Avengers? So far, that's 2 down. In spite of their modestly successful efforts in action filmmaking, they are not maestros of stunt choreography like John Wick's Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, Their action sequences have too much haphazard shaky cam and the choreography lacks the balletic grace of John Wick. Nor do they have the blunt force impact of a Michael Bay or Paul Greengrass. They lack the mastery of montage and smash cuts of these directors, opting for more conventional action coverage. They are capable action directors, but not top level, and by no means the new action auteurs, so the action scenes throughout The Gray Man are watchable, but nothing to write home about. The film is best when characters are fighting one-on-one, or when there's some color and impressive locations on the screen. For instance, the opening fight scene on New Year's Eve in Bangkok plays with the reds, yellows, and oranges of fireworks in inventive ways. Their filmmaking is at its worst when it goes big and the CGI starts to buckle under the weight of the scale. A fight scene aboard a tram in Prague makes the goofy, climactic chase of last year's F9, the Fast Saga seem rather credible in retrospect. And when there aren't guns blasting or characters beating down on each other, the film's not all that interesting. The Russo's version of character flavor is Woodenesque banter and cringe-worthy bad guy lines such as "if you wanna make an omelette, you gotta kill some people," which Chris Evans struggles with. In fact, Evans struggles throughout. He's a great Captain America, but whenever he plays a clever bastard, as he does here, he can seem more annoying than amusing. Add that to the film's paint-by-numbers depiction of psychopathy. Jessica Hennick calling Lloyd a sociopath recalls some unfortunate line readings from The Room, and you've got a truly weak bad guy, not just a forgettable one. The film's quiet character moments aren't much better, as the main emotional thrust of the film relies on Gosling bonding with Julie Butters Claire, Fitzroy's young niece. His protectiveness of her dovetails with some trauma from his upbringing, which plays into the familiar modern playset of male action heroes working out their trauma through violence. It's rather dull, although you don't blame Gosling, or Butters, who continues to impress after making such a mark as the young actress sharing a scene with Leonardo DiCaprio in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's simplified emotional layering to try to make us care about the cat and mouse between Gosling and Evans, and pretty standard in these types of movies nowadays. The Gray Man is surely better than many of the other $200 million would-be blockbusters that Netflix has produced. I watched it, while I wouldn't watch Red Notice even if I were paid to. It's nice to see Gosling again. It's appealing to watch globe-trotting action. But surely, with this budget and this cast, we can expect a better script and some filmmaking with a bit more verve. Watching two guys throw each other around a French castle is fun, but there's a way to make such a thing art. With The Gray Man, it's just modestly diverting content. Do you like empty posturing and stylistics, faux clever banter, saccharine emotional manipulation, dubious, meaning non-existent, character motivation, wannabe cool needle drops, and a series of exhausting set pieces? How about muddy visuals, hollow action, and an over-reliance on camera tricks due to a lack of ability to shoot a fight scene? Just for kicks, why not throw in a stacked cast of actors you like but wish were all in a better movie? And all for a bloated price tag of $200 million. If that sounds like fun, it's not, but it all adds to Netflix's latest vapid action offering, The Gray Man, from Marvel alums the Russo brothers. The Gray Man wants to be many things: a James Bond movie, a Bourne movie, a Mission Impossible movie, and, perhaps most of all, a Shane Black movie. Only it plays like a photocopy of all of those. On the surface it looks like the thing, but it misses what make those movies fun and good, instead opting for tepid, toothless PG-13 action that carries precisely zero weight because there's no one particularly interesting or compelling to invest in. Stars Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans do their best in this tale of a shadowy government assassin, Gosling, betrayed by his handlers and hunted by a psychotic private contractor, Evans. But not even their considerable charm and enthusiasm can salvage this bloated, ugly movie that feels like the result of a feeding superior films into a bot. Also, nothing actually resolves at the end. It's all set up for the next installment, hinting at things to come, laying the groundwork for more bullshit sequels. I know that's not how it works anymore, but once, just once, I'd like filmmakers to tell a good, complete, compelling story, then worry about establishing a franchise. I've watched far worse, but damn, The Gray Man is just the bland shell of an action movie. It's the best of these kind of usually forgettable movies. The dialogue is snappy and funny when it wants to be. The action set pieces are fun and for the most part have great blocking and clarity. The cast is its biggest strength, with most of the small side characters being genuinely interesting. Gosling is terrific. Is this his first all-out action movie? He's a great action leading man who's both extremely capable and totally fallible. Ana de Armas turns in a good repeat performance of her character from No Time to Die Again, even though she left a bigger impression in those couple minutes of screen time. It pains me to say this, Chris Evans is noticeably miscast. I get it, if you have a personal connection to Evans you cast Evans. He's having a great time and he deserves to get out from Captain America, but the whole time I was just so aware I was watching Evans play a bad guy and never just bought him as the bad guy. I spent not a small amount of the runtime wondering if maybe he and Gosling should have been swapped. Oof, and that runtime. It's too long by almost a quarter, and all of that to not even wrap up satisfactorily. It's definitely gunning for a sequel and kind of suffers from it. There's a bit of rough CGI here which I don't necessarily hold against the movie itself so much as the industry's tendency to just storyboard cool stuff and be like, don't worry about how we'll do it, I've got a guy. The falling from an airplane scene is layered in so much digital lens dirt and flares that it might as well have switched to an audiobook for that sequence. There's a cool action bit where Six is fighting guys while filling the room with the pink smoke from a flare. It's painfully obvious the smoke is CGI. But, I mean, it's smoke. I get that you'd have to clear the room after every take, but it's smoke. Your movie will exist forever now and you couldn't schedule the extra day to allow for real smoke. Those are my only real gripes. That, and please don't let FPV drone footage in movies become a thing. But otherwise, it's plenty of fun and I'd certainly recommend it to just about anyone if they've already got a night in planned. That's what the growth of stylish, hyper-violent, technically accomplished, skillfully produced, massively budgeted movies has done. It has cemented the primacy of an entire category of film that can do everything that could possibly be expected of it, everything it means to do, and can still feel made out of nothing. Cast with talented, capital M capital S movie stars with the charisma to carry it, in this case, Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans, a movie like The Gray Man can have a lot of pleasures. It can have cleverness, inventiveness, a wink to its embrace of extremely silly set pieces. But there's something that's just not there about it, an unnerving sense that if you unwound the whole thing layer after layer, you'd discover it's wrapped around only itself. The setup, based on Mark Greene's 2009 novel, is this: years ago, to get out of a long prison sentence, the man we know as Six, Ryan Gosling, gave up his identity, name, history, family, connections, and became an assassin, an asset of the United States government, in exchange for his freedom. He is part of one of those impossible mission force-style teams, the glamour of which is based on the idea that there are limitations on what the government does in the light of day, and that the bravest badasses are the ones who ignore those limitations. Six begins the story being sent to kill a guy he doesn't know anything about, but during the mission, things get complicated, and he winds up on the run himself, on the wrong side of his own secret, violent, lawless, unaccountable organization. Whoops. This basically happens to absolutely every participant in a force like this at some point. Six's chilly boss, Regine Page, just as hot in a suit and glasses as he was on Bridgerton, wants him tracked down by any means necessary and brings in a private contractor to do the job. That contractor's name is Lloyd Hansen, and he is played by Chris Evans in an unflattering short haircut and a cheap, sleazy little mustache. Lloyd may have imposing arms, in both senses, and he may sometimes show the same flashes of wit that Evans brought to his role in Knives Out, but make no mistake, both these guys are long-time hired killers, but he is the bad guy. 6 is meant to be the good guy, just trying to survive and save Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, the retired mentor whose continuing safety is now being used as leverage against him. Hansen is into straight up torturing people, which we get to / have to watch, and which is one of the many things about the film that raises the question, look around at the world, do we have to do this right now? There are a lot of lively, nicely done bits in The Gray Man, smart uses of reflections, a preposterous but propulsive sequence involving handcuffs and a bench, a solid running gag about the people who keep having to help 6 not die, and an underutilized but still effective Ana de Armas doing a lot of very cool fighting. Gosling's dry, exhausted muttering and Evans' cheesy, sleazy, high-energy declarations are an effective matched set. The action doesn't feel phoned in, it feels stylish, in its way, as does the everything should look like a nightclub lighting of much of the movie, including the parts that do not take place in nightclubs. But The Gray Man feels hollow, and it's not because it needs to be a character-driven drama. It's enough for the stakes to be all about good guys and bad guys, it really is. But in this case, everybody in the story is a merciless killer who does what they're told. We don't necessarily know what kinds of people 6 has killed on request, and murders who they're told to murder, pretty much, and picking through the details to differentiate who's good and who's bad feels beside the point. In the dynamic between 6 and Hansen, the inspiration would seem to be Die Hard, with Hansen as the highly competent bad guy you almost root for, except that John McClane was also trying to save a building full of innocent people. Finding all of this unsatisfying is the kind of complaint that gets one tagged as a person who doesn't understand mindless action movies, but lots of mindless action movies don't suffer from this ailment. They find a way to feel built around something solid, whether it's a team or a mission or a particular purpose. Consider, if you will, The Fast. Consider, as we must, The Furious. The Gray Man also can't quite work as a story of chaos among amoral chaos agents, the way, say, a mafia story can, because 6 and Hansen don't have an existing relationship. In fact, most of these people don't have much in the way of relationships with each other than 6 and his other mentor, played by Alfre Woodard. The relationship between the two of them feels instantly genuine and compelling, by far the most believable in the movie, but the time we spend with it is comically brief. If everybody is going to be off the books hired killers differentiated only at the margins, the stakes have to come from the individuals. Let's have some betrayals, some old wounds, some old arguments, some long-growing resentments. We've got Ryan Gosling and we've got Chris Evans and we've got Ana de Armas, we could even have some sex. There's something more interesting hovering around the edges of this project, as is often the case with creatively unsatisfying outings from talented people. The Gray Man is both a celebration of a certain kind of intoxicating, overcranked masculinity and, at times, a mockery of it. Lloyd is terrifying and merciless, but he's also ridiculous. And the basic structure of the film is that 6 finds himself in situation after situation in which it appears that he cannot possibly escape, in the manner of James Bond or, if you will, MacGyver, and it repeatedly takes other people, specifically, women, to bail him out. There is a delicate balance in which 6 is both a superhuman who survives the obviously unsurvivable, and a fallible guy who keeps getting got. Gosling and Evans both seem to be playing to this potential, to the preposterous manly showdown that neither of them really has the juice to win. But while that idea dances around the margins, the film comes back over and over to a more conventional, more muscular, literally, approach. What is missing here is a narrative engine. Call it John Wick's puppy, the moment that provides even the thinnest thread of something else to care about besides killer versus killer. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that, as in John Wick, many fictional women, mostly wives and girlfriends but also the occasional daughter or colleague, have given their lives on or off screen so that men with guns can seem more human, which is also not great. Here, along those lines, you eventually get a vulnerable young girl imperiled, but by the time that happens, it seems wildly cynical. The directors of The Gray Man are Joe and Anthony Russo, whom you might know from making Marvel movies, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Captain America, Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War and Avengers, Endgame, that grossed something like $6 billion worldwide. What they have learned about how to stage a big action sequence with the benefit of a huge budget, reportedly $200 million, shows here. While this is far more bloody than an MCU outing, it's also solidly choreographed, if more than a little silly. It's the kind of movie where a fight takes place around the tubes that are firing off a fireworks display just because, sure. Why not? Looks cool. It's the kind of movie where a guy in a fight starts throwing around red smoke bombs because, sure. Looks cool. I should note, I went to a theatrical screening. Because this is a spectacle, it will be interesting to see how it holds up when seen mostly at home. Nothing here seems accidentally or poorly done, these are choices. With all the effort that's gone into the action, the most conspicuous issues with execution are actually in the dialogue. While there are some funny lines, particularly for the two leads, there are also places where a line that's clearly meant to pack a punch sounds like a first draft that needed a couple more passes. You can tell what the line is supposed to do, you are cued by sound and pacing and pauses, but it doesn't quite do it. Wishing is not critique. It may not be, in the strictest sense, criticism to simply wish everyone involved in a project like this had taken their considerable talent, skill, power, money, imagination, and so forth and done something else. The Gray Man seems to be exactly what it means to be, and in the moment, it's often fun. But there's something eerily vacant in its assembly. Maybe even trained movie assassins need something to believe in. Hello and welcome back. Today we are reviewing Netflix's big $200 million bet, Anthony and Joe Russo's The Gray Man. Opinions: I think The Gray Man is alright. That's probably not what Netflix wants me to say, they're not paying me by the way, but I think it is a film that could grow into a good franchise because I think the things that work quite well in this film do work well, but for me there are some definite issues. I think one of the strongest things about this film is the cast. This is Ryan Gosling's first film in 4 years, since First Man, and I must say this is a great way to return for him. Obviously he has been in action-adjacent films like Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive, 2011, but he has never been in a classic-style action film like Die Hard or anything in the Mission Impossible franchise, and he is a very good action hero. 6 is his name in this film, and if this film becomes a successful franchise I think he will become a good hero because you know he is quite likable, and not to spoil too much but Gosling has a good emotional connection with Claire Fitzroy, played by Julia Butters, which, not to get too off topic, but that is a super cool name. Like there were good scenes where they bonded together, especially the joke where Claire told him he wasn't allowed to chew gum in their house, and that line came back in the final scene, which was cool to see. Ana de Armas plays Danny Miranda, and I must say that I really like Ana de Armas. I think she is extremely talented, and I personally think she was Oscar worthy in Knives Out. Wow, a Knives Out reunion, and I'm pretty sure Evans and de Armas are making another film together. After looking it up, they're starring in a film called Ghosted, which will be released on Apple TV and finished filming in May 2022, so will probably be released next year. Like, she was so good in that, but I am disappointed she wasn't given too much to do in this film. Like, she does well with what she has, but I think her character is so underwritten, there is just not much there, which is disappointing because from what she is given she seems like she could become a really good action hero. I am gonna save my boy Chris Evans for later because he deserves another section. The rest of the cast includes Billy Bob Thornton, Alfre Woodward, whose screen time was far too short, Regine Page, For All You Brit Gerton Stans, and Dhanush. A new trend in action movies that has emerged in the last couple of years is the use of drones and drone shots, and while maybe a good way to establish a location and get us involved in the world, I really do not think they work well in fight scenes. Like, one of my issues is that I think that it makes the action sequences in these films feel really choppy, and the plane sequence in this film just felt like I was watching a Saw movie with all of the quick cuts and weird distorted editing. This drone technique was also used in Michael Bay's Ambulance, 2022, and while I haven't seen that movie, or any other Michael Bay movie for that matter. You can imagine that I am not exactly running home to watch his filmography. I am just not sure why it has become a thing, because in my opinion it kinda ruins potentially very good action scenes. I think the drone shots were used on all of the action scenes, but to me at least it really stood out to me in that plane sequence. The rest of the action scenes were pretty fun, and at least I knew what was going on. So yeah, Chris Evans is the best thing in this movie. He plays the violent sociopath that is Lloyd Hansen, and you can tell that he is having an absolute blast in the role. I think that you could definitely say that the role is a little bit overly cartoonish and over the top, but I definitely have a little bit of a soft spot for villains who knowingly indulge in villainous tropes and having an laugh while they are doing it. I personally think that is why Maleficent is the most popular villain out of all the classic Disney villains, let's say pre-Little Mermaid and Ursula, because in Sleeping Beauty she is having so much fun, casting the curse on baby Aurora, and to prove my point I am pretty sure she even laughs when the kingdom guards and soldiers try to attack her. Anyway, to finish my long-winded point, I like and I think other people like when villains are having loads of fun in films, and Lloyd Hansen is a very good example of this. Evans sports a square-style mustache. I don't really know the official name for the style. If you know, tell me in the comments. There you go, there is my shameless plug. Are you appeased, algorithm? And I think he looks really good in it. I have heard some people complaining that he didn't twirl it, but come on people, it wasn't that style of mustache. His and Ryan Gosling's fight scene, especially one which was towards the end of the film, which was at a fountain in a maze. One question, whose house was that? Like they were just situated in that house. Okay, as I typed this I realized that it was Fitzroy's house, so I am just being silly, sorry. Like it was really well shot, especially the use of lighting. Like I am pretty sure that it is late at night, but the use of the sun was really cool. Another thing that was really good was the score by Henry Jackman. It really suited all of the sequences and suited the modern feel, like it felt like the Gray Man, you know what I mean. Henry Jackman is doing a lot of good work as of recently. I think another one of my issues is that this doesn't really stand out in the pantheon of recent action movies. Like this could be another installment in the Bourne franchise, and I don't think anyone would really bat an eye. Ryan Gosling would make a good rebooted Bourne, like instead of the random Jeremy Renner one that clearly no one liked because they only made one of them and then they went back to Matt Damon and people didn't really like that one either, so it was kinda a lose-lose situation. As I said in the intro, Netflix has spent $200 million on this film, so you would think they definitely want this film to become a franchise. Obviously Netflix is kinda in a shaky place at this moment, with them losing a fair amount of subscribers as of late, and I think just the public mood has kinda just gone a little bit south for Netflix. And I will be interested to see how it all pans out, because audiences are clearly liking the film because it has a 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't seen much of the Russo's filmography, I'll be honest, but I personally think they work a little better when they have more of a specific story structure and characters that are established. It is based on a 2009 book, because this just feels a little bit messy and there isn't an established universe like there is in the MCU. I looked at the budget for this movie after watching it. It says it cost $200 million, produced by Netflix, their most expensive project to date. I couldn't see where that money went to on screen, even with two big names like Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans leading the show, since the movie relies heavily on computerized chaos. Maybe it's a result of this inflation business, but at any rate, one of this year's big action movies is a bit dull and hollow. An adaptation of Mark Greaney's The Gray Man novels, this show sees lowlife with a heart Sierra 6, Ryan Gosling, offered a chance to have his prison sentence commuted if he agrees to go and do some killin' for the CIA. Agent Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, will be his mentor. The movie then cuts to 18 years later, when Six starts to question whether or not the people he's being ordered to kill are actually baddies. That's a long time for a man to pick up on cues, but the movie isn't interested in going in depth. Well, the establishment can't have that, and the hit is put out on Gosling. They send smug asshat Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, to get the job done, while good agent Danny Miranda, Ana de Armas, goes rogue and helps the hero. This movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes long, but is impersonal and bereft of any story. You can get away with that with shorter movies that know when to leave the stage. For instance, there's many a Scott Adkins movie hovering over the 85-minute mark, with 1/10 the budget that is better than this. Directed by the Russo brothers of MCU fame, they dispense with any narrative and instead give us a patchwork of action scenes linked together with sarcastic jibes from both Gosling and Evans. And so the movie's health relies on its action scenes. Some are good, some are boring. I mean, there are great visuals here, and I celebrated the death of shaking cameras / hyper editing, since the Russos are keen to show us who is hitting who, etc. There are good fight scenes and visual character, however some of it goes over the top, straying into Avengers exhaustion territory. I don't like CGI chaos, where an A-lister is dancing a jig in front of a green screen. I tend to disassociate from shit that gets too excitable. Happens a lot in this movie. It's not bad, really, but it gets tiresome. It needed to be shorter, with a bit more restraint. We all know this story, right? Guy becomes an assassin, Guy questions the motives of this hit, and some cover team puts a bounty on Guy's head to keep him quiet. The Gray Man isn't reinventing the wheel here with storytelling, but rather seeks to make a more bombastic, funny, action flick than we've seen in a while, especially on a streaming service like Netflix. The Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, yes, the filmmaking duo we all know and love from Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame, bring to your home cinema an incredibly amusing and thrilling take on the aforementioned cliché. Court gentry aka Sierra 6, Ryan Gosling, has a past which landed him in prison for his foreseeable future, until the CIA's Donald Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, recruits the charming wisecracker in exchange for a commuted sentence. Included in the fine print is essentially the note that you no longer exist, kiss goodbye to any life you had before, do the job, and don't ask questions. Unfortunately for the CIA, Six goes rogue and steals a hard drive containing agency secrets that he was tasked in retrieving. An unpredictable freelance contractor, Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, is hired on by the CIA to hunt down Six and the hard drive, rallying the world's assassins by offering an explosive bounty for the mission. This is the summer blockbuster we've all been waiting for. If all goes well, I'd anticipate a return to this world. Ryan Gosling is in his prime, kicking the most ass and doesn't care about taking names. Even though he's an assassin, the Russo brothers made sure to give us a character in Six they knew we'd connect with. Tough on the outside, soft on the inside, like a Twix or some other delicious late-night treat. Sierra 6 is the kind of man who still lives with a code and is only in this world as an alternative to being behind bars. Don't get me wrong, he is damn good at his job, which is why Lloyd and CIA director Denny Carmichael, Regine Page, are really risking it for the biscuit in this effort. Playing against type this much is something I never expected Chris Evans to return to after his many years as Captain America. Evans' humorous, egotistical, and volatile torturer via Lloyd enlightens every scene, despite his Nazi stature. The rebuttal chemistry between Evans and Gosling is palpable, managing to outshine all other players on screen, including a kick-ass co-assassin in Ana de Armas as Danny. Every fight scene, whether it's Ana de Armas spy on Six Trail, Evans, or Gosling, feels like a choreographed dance routine. The meticulous and deliberate motions that each individual carries is so precise and effortless. Particularly for a streaming film, this is not the level of choreography I would expect, which turns out to be a good thing. Although the sharp and, at times, neon color palette is beginning to feel grating in this 2010s era, The Gray Man is a beautiful tribute to films with this visual appearance, such as John Wick. The difference between The Gray Man and John Wick ultimately comes down to story. Otherwise, the action, performances, humor, and engagement are all on par with each other. The Russo brothers' streak of creating fully fledged films that exceed expectations is surely intact. Netflix's latest attempt at the action movie blockbuster is The Gray Man, which is based on Mark Greaney's 2009 spy thriller novel. For The Gray Man, directors Anthony and Joe Russo re-team with a few of their Marvel Cinematic Universe collaborators, including writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, as well as Captain America himself Chris Evans. For their second directorial effort since closing out the MCU's Phase 3 with Avengers: Endgame, the Russos assembled a star-studded cast: Ryan Gosling, Ana de Armas, Regina Page, Billy Bob Thornton and Dhanush. The Gray Man is a spiritual throwback to 80s and 90s action movies, with pulse-pounding fight scenes, delightfully cheesy dialogue, and a wickedly fun villain. In The Gray Man, Gosling stars as action hero Sierra 6, a member of a cover team within the CIA made up of former criminals recruited by Donald Fitzroy, Thornton, to carry out off-the-books assassinations. When 6 is enlisted by the CIA's Denny Carmichael, Page, to eliminate a target, the mission turns out to be more complicated than expected. 6 is forced to go on the run, leaving Carmichael to call in the psychopathic mercenary Lloyd Hansen, Evans. 6 calls in favors from old friends like former CIA ally Margaret Cahill, Alfred Woodard, and gets help from CIA agent Danny Miranda, de Armas, in order to survive all the killers Hansen drafts to hunt him, including the formidable of Ixan, Dhanush. Though 6 is one of the CIA's best, it remains to be seen if he'll be able to escape the situation with his life and rescue Fitzroy's niece Claire, Julia Butters, in the process. The story of The Gray Man, as adapted by Marcus and McFeely, is a little convoluted, and the movie glosses over much of the CIA politics surrounding the Sierra program, focusing instead on the action set pieces and developing the personalities of its characters, particularly Gosling 6 and Evans Lloyd. The script itself is chock full of cheesy quips, including, but not even remotely limited to, a comment about Gosling looking like a Ken doll and an order to make him dead. These are all delivered with just the right amount of panache by Evans, who's devilishly electric as the sociopathic villain. Gosling 6 balances out the outrageous personality of Lloyd with a more stoic and glib action hero, but he's no less entertaining. In fact, when Gosling and Evans go toe-to-toe either with jibes or fists, they're the most exhilarating scenes in The Gray Man. The Russos knew what they were doing when they cast Evans and Gosling, and the actors deftly deliver performances that feel deliberately tongue-in-cheek rather than overly grim. Beyond Gosling and Evans, The Gray Man has an outstanding supporting cast, who help to deliver the exciting action and personality that make the movie so entertaining. The supporting cast don't get nearly as much to work with, but they each do well with what they have. De Armas brings some depth to Danny as she works alongside Gosling's 6, and certainly proves her action chops after being underused in No Time to Die. Thornton, Woodard, and Butters are serviceable in their supporting roles, but don't necessarily outshine the stars. Dhanush, on the other hand, is a standout in The Gray Man. Though he has a small role, his character is fiercely brutal and proves to be an intimidating foe for 6. His screen presence is such that Dhanush's action scenes are some of the best in the movie. However, if there are casualties of The Gray Man script, it's Page as Denny and Jessica Hennick as Suzanne, both of whom fail to strike the right tone for the movie and who are afforded no help by their own ridiculous dialogue. Overall, the Russo brothers deliver a thrilling summer popcorn movie with The Gray Man that's elevated by the charismatic performances of Gosling and Evans. In terms of Netflix releases, the movie is akin to 6 Underground and Red Notice, both of which are anchored by Ryan Reynolds and has similar sensibilities in terms of being a globe-trotting action/adventure movie, but with a focus on espionage. What's more, The Gray Man doesn't rely on Reynolds' specific brand of humor, instead playing to Gosling and Evans' different strengths in terms of comedy. While Netflix viewers may have their own opinions, The Gray Man feels like a step above the streamer's past action movies, offering more exciting fight sequences, more uproarious humor and a more completely entertaining movie experience. As such, The Gray Man is certainly worth checking out for anyone remotely interested in the story, cast, or filmmakers. Because of the excellently executed action scenes, those who are able would do well with watching The Gray Man in theaters, as it heightens the experience. At the very least, it's definitely recommended to watch The Gray Man on the biggest screen possible, even for those who view the movie after its streaming release on Netflix. Between the Russos behind the camera and the talent in front of it, The Gray Man is a fun and exciting action thriller. It may be in the vein of cheesy 80s and 90s action movies, but that makes The Gray Man all the more entertaining and rewatchable. One of the sad truths of the entertainment world is that the bigger a star you become, the more likely you are to be lured into dumb vehicles that are in some ways, or in all ways, beneath you. Maybe that's how Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans, two of Hollywood's most appealing actors, can end up in a showy but hollow movie like The Gray Man, directed by Joe and Anthony Russo and adapted from Mark Greene's novel, a picture that tries desperately to be an over-the-top mission, impossible adventure only to end up in a no-man's land of inconsequence. It's entertaining only in the most plotting sense. You could really cast almost anyone in this thing. When the characters played by Gosling and Evans, the first a dubious hero, the other an obvious villain, encounter each other for the first time, Gosling says, "I immediately don't like you," to which Evans responds, "Looks like we're on the same page." With repartee like that, who needs movie stars? You may as well have two pieces of meat talking to one another. Gosling plays a skilled operative known only as Six, the last remaining member of Sierra, a group of black ops assassins put together by understated CIA smart Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton. Early on, we see Six prowling through a riotous party in Bangkok, dressed in a slinky red suit. He's there to kill some bad guy, who turns out to be perhaps not so bad after all. And from there, Six becomes embroiled in another mission, that of bringing down a corrupt agency honcho, Carmichael, Regine Page, of Britt Girton, a man with secrets he'll do anything to protect. To that end, Carmichael hires cocky psychopathic freelancer Lloyd Hansen, Evans, a sadist so sick even his one-time employer, the CIA, kicked him out. Lloyd favors tight white pants and soft suede loafers worn without socks. He also sports a cartoonish sprout of facial hair which Six at one point refers to as a trash stash. In The Gray Man, the quips just keep on coming. Because he'll stop at nothing, Lloyd kidnaps the person Fitzroy loves most in the world, his niece, Claire, played by Julia Butters, the marvelous young actress who sparred with Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time, in Hollywood. Claire happens to have a heart condition, as well as an attendant pacemaker, which will figure prominently and conveniently in the plot. Ana de Armas drifts through the film in the thankless role of a CIA agent who steps in now and then have to save Six bacon. The action jumps listlessly from Bangkok to Langley, Virginia, to Vienna to Prague without giving much of a sense of any of those places. There's plenty of generic gunplay and anonymous but fiery explosions, as well as a sequence in which a character's fingernails are pulled out, off camera, but still, with pliers and dropped onto a plate in all their miniature, bloody glory. Joe and Anthony Russo are the guys behind one of the highest grossing movies of all time, Avengers: Endgame. But financial success doesn't equate to thoughtful filmmaking. The Captain America movies they made with Evans, The Winter Soldier and Civil War, are much better films than either Endgame or its immediate predecessor, Avengers: Infinity War. The Gray Man, reportedly Netflix's most expensive movie to date and likely the start of a new franchise, has a costly, opulent look that adds up to nothing, leaving you feeling not so much dazzled as pummeled. And in the movie's climax, when Six and Lloyd finally square off in a bout of hand-to-hand combat accompanied by much grunting and groaning, they practically smelt into one fleshy, undistinguished blob. Though both are pumped up to cartoonish proportions, they barely work as eye candy. Their personalities have been subsumed by their showy bodies. There's nothing witty or charming or even dashingly diabolical about either of them. The Gray Man inadvertently pulls off a mission you'd think would be impossible, rendering its stars nearly invisible, or at least just people you can't wait to get away from. If all you knew about the CIA was what you saw in Anthony and Joe Russo's The Gray Man, you would think it was solely devoted to assassination. The entire plot of the film revolves around the psychopathic Lloyd Hansen, Chris Evans, trying to take out his former colleague. court gentry, Ryan Gosling, A.K. Sierra 6, after the latter uncovers unsavory secrets about the agency, which wants to eliminate every trace of Sierra, a poorly considered program that turns convicted murderers into government-sanctioned killers. If this sounds like the plot of every Jason Bourne film, that's because it basically is. Like the Bourne films, the Gray Man jumps from one city to another, stages elaborate fight scenes in tight quarters, a transport plane in mid-air, a Vienna street tram, and saddles its hero with a traumatic backstory to justify his sullen personality. Unlike that series, though, the film gives the hero a redemptive arc in which he needs to rescue a young girl, Claire, Julia Butters, the niece of Court's mentor-cum-father figure, Fitzroy, Billy Bob Thornton, who Lloyd kidnapped for leverage. Also, unlike just about any other film about an agent on the run, the Gray Man doesn't bother having Court get to the bottom of anything. That would waste time better spent on the next very expensive set piece in which Court kills many people. The first of those set pieces is an impressively ludicrous bit of business in which Court is ordered to take out a man in a Bangkok nightclub by using a sniper rifle to shoot through not one but two glass floors. But he balks after spotting a child in the way, thus establishing Court as that most beloved of modern cinematic archetypes, the killer with a heart of gold. Instead, he tries a different angle, silently taking out the target's entourage one at a time with knives filched from plates along the way. Though the choreography is sloppily staged, a recurring problem throughout the final fight between Court and his target is neatly framed by a seemingly endless fireworks display that establishes the film's penchant for excess. That fight gives Court his MacGuffin, a data drive suggesting corrupt skullduggery by CIA honcho Dennis, Gene Page, whose badness is indicated by his sneering impatience and frequent mentions of having attended Harvard. After that, the chase is on to the next set piece, with Lloyd and a motley crew of international assassins in pursuit of Court and his unlikely CIA ally, Danny, Ana de Armas. All the while, Russos have a difficult time deciding what to focus on more, the shootouts pitched at such a high level that they resemble battle scenes, or the sarcastic sniping between Court and Lloyd. Not surprisingly, the former get more screen time, especially a shootout between police and Lloyd's kill squads in Vienna, where the excess would have been better played as comedy, but the latter is more entertaining. Having played the straight man for the Russos in their Captain America and Avengers films, Evans seems unleashed here. Playing a vain and impatient but chipper sadist with a quick wit, the actor tears into the role with the relish of John Travolta in Face Off. Meanwhile, the ever-laconic Gosling deftly plays the straight man, pricking the bubble of Lloyd's pride as he evades one trap after another while mocking his pursuer. Asked how he spotted Lloyd after only talking to him on the phone, Court replies, "The white pants and the trash stash just says Lloyd." While their characters are stock, switching them around and giving the hero all the good lines might have been nice for once. Evans and Gosling clearly enjoy their material, and that sense of play comprises most of what's fun about the Gray Man. Those glimmers of wit and chemistry are mostly non-existent with the rest of the cast. Alfre Woodard brings cynical bite to her brief role as a retired spymaster, while Tamil star Dhanush appears in a cameo that seems to be setting his character up for a possible sequel or offshoot, but they're the exceptions. Adapted by Joe Russo, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely from a multi-novel series by Mark Greaney, The Gray Man is a noisy, flashy spectacle that piles cliches atop ludicrous plotting and sprinkles it all with half-funny quips, all in the hope of bulldozing the audience into submission. Yes, it's cool when Danny takes out an entire Croatian castle's worth of baddies with a well-deployed grenade launcher. But at some point, the Russos will hopefully remember that firepower is not a substitute for story. This film, directed by Anthony Russo, screenplay by Joe Russo, based on The Gray Man, produced by Joe Russo, starring Ryan Gosling, cinematography Stephen F. Winden, edited by Jeff Groth, music by Henry Jackman, distributed by Netflix, release date July 15, 2022, running time 129 minutes, country United States, language English. Budget $200 million. Box office $454,023.